Stan Ward. And this is the first meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee. The date is Thursday, February 15th. And we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping since this is our first meeting. I believe everyone here was on the committee last year, so you sort of know the drill. Delegate Denise Roberts is our only new subcommittee member, so we will welcome her. And just a reminder to the public, I don't think we have any guests on, but when we do have guests, we just ask them to have their cameras off so that the members can be featured on the live stream. And we'll call upon guests as needed, but guests are not expected to participate. Members, as a reminder, I do invite, as a courtesy, the sponsors of the bills that we're discussing, just so in case there are questions or just as a courtesy, I like to let them know that we're discussing their bill. But again, they are not able to participate unless one of you calls on them for a specific question or some kind of clarification. So with that, as always, you'll get notice with as much time as we can give about the bills that we're expecting to discuss, expecting to vote on, and so on and so forth. So you'll sort of have that category in your mind of what's taking place. We have two bills today that we are going to be discussing and possibly voting. And I'd like to start by taking those bills up. The first bill is House Bill 331, which is election law candidate expenditures, campaign-related childcare expenses. And what this bill does is it basically codifies what is already an existing allowance, which is allowing people, candidates, to be able to use their campaign expenses for necessary childcare. It does have to be related to your campaign, just like any other expenditure, but it ensures that ability to be able to do that. Stan, is there anything that you can say about the current existing practice and how it works?
Sure, yeah, it's based on SBE guidance, and it's pretty basic. It basically just says that the child care has to be necessary for it to support your campaign. So, for instance, that you're going to a campaign event. But that's pretty much the extent of the existing guidance from SBE.
Okay, got it. The one question that I did have and wanted to get the members' thoughts on, and I brought this up a little bit in committee, and maybe we just instruct SBE to do it. It's just maybe perhaps we want to have some kind of guardrails. I feel just a little bit, childcare is something that's usually very personal. It could be an aunt, it could be your ex-spouse, it could be your child, and it maybe, can get a little um interesting sometimes potentially if those campaign expenses are going maybe to family members, friends, things like that, which could definitely be necessary expenses. So it's just something I think we should at least talk about. Perhaps we just have SBE issue just clear guidance. But I just wanted to make sure we talk that through. Any comments or thoughts about that or anything else on the bill? Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you raise an important question. I do think the State Board of Elections could address that through regulations, is my understanding. And so I'm comfortable with this. I do think, we want folks to have an opportunity to run for office and to run effectively. And the reality is, for folks with children who need childcare, that can be a real barrier. So I think this is important. It's consistent, as we said earlier, with the existing guidance, but I think it's really important to codify it so that people know, and there's no question, because I do think it is a significant barrier to entry and participation. So again, I think it's an important point you raise. I'm comfortable with letting the board address that through regulation. I think the important point here is that we codify that it is allowable. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Miller.
Yes, I second everything that Delegate Feldmark said. And I would add that I would not have been able to run for office when my kids were young. I started when my youngest was in kindergarten. And I would not have been able to run if I did not have the help of my family. So I appreciate the chair's concern about how do we put those guardrails in place, because yes, we are codifying that, but how do we communicate that those things are okay, both for someone who's running for office protection? I think it's important to clarify those. So whether it's through regulation or through in the bill, I'm fine with either way, but it's an excellent point.
Thank you, Delegate. Mr. Demarinis just joined us. We're talking about, and I should say State Administrator Demarinis. That is actually, I might have to have a nickname for that because it's a little long. But
It's
we
definitely
were
a
just
tongue.
it's a tongue twister, right? We were just talking about the child care bill, which I think has very much broad support, codifying the ability to utilize your campaign expenditures around child care expenses. The one thing that we were talking about was just wanting to protect both the candidate and the public in terms of possibly having guardrails around, it could be a ex-spouse, a child, someone kind of close to them, to the candidate that is being paid out, which should totally be legitimate and allowable. But just thinking about making sure that we may want to have some protections and guardrails in there. I just wanted to get a sense from you currently, because this is current practice, how you handle those sorts of things.
Right now, it's more on a case-by-case basis, and we use it in the general sense of saying whether or not the activity for the child care was in furtherance of the campaign and would not have occurred but for a electoral purpose, meaning, a date night for movies would not necessarily meet the threshold, but attending a fundraiser, attending events, a rally, working longer hours where you would need any sort of childcare support would be acceptable. And as long as there's a nexus between that for the candidate and the event, that would be sufficient for us. So we didn't really put it in regs. We just kind of used the guidance on that. And, so that's kind of the guidelines, and we would still keep it going there. If this law would pass, we'd probably put it more in the guidelines in the summary guide, because it's very hard to write every different type of scenario there, but you would kind of get a concept of what would be permissible and what would not be permissible. The other part too, which is good, is that this is on a public document. So if a person kind of questions it or anything, like, it would just be like a regular expenditure that would be questioned by, the public for us to review and inquire about with the committee.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like it would be detailed more in the summary guide that we have, that you all issue, rather than detailed out in regulations.
Yeah. Yes, just because regulations, it's just, there's so many different little scenarios. We can probably put a little bit of the framework in there, but the specific things would have to always be, it would be easier to address probably with some guidance rather than regs.
And
Okay.
may I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
They would have to document the expenditure just like any other expenditure, is that right?
That is correct. This is just like every other expenditure that comes in. There would have to be a receipt, and I would say this is where best practices would kind of occur, which would be if you do use this, I would suggest putting the flyer of the fundraiser attached to that receipt, so you can show, oh look, it's from 5 to 7 the fundraiser, but we had coverage from 4 to 8. Or beyond that, and just so that it shows the nexus relationship between the child care services and the electoral event.
Thank you. Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, because we've been talking a lot about events, and that's certainly an important piece of this, but I want to make sure we're not limited just to events, because when we think about how people spend their time during a campaign, right? Like just door knocking is a huge amount of time that most candidates put in, and something that is much more difficult to do with a child, right? And so I just want to make sure we're not so focused on events that we look broadly at things like, I mean, if a candidate is doing call time and needs someone to watch a toddler, right? Like, I mean, so when we get into documenting, I want to make sure that that can also be sort of a self-declared, this is what I was doing.
Yes, yeah, I would say it would just have to have some relationship, and whether or not it would just be there. It's just that there has to be an electoral purpose. Event is just the easiest of all the things, but yes, if you just say, I was out knocking doors from this time to this time and needed coverage, I was doing call time at night and I needed coverage, those are all acceptable expenditures in order to assist your campaign.
Thank you. Great point, Delegate. And the bill does define it as direct care, protection, and supervision of a child. So that should be broad enough to include in the expenditure, reasonably expensive for childcare services that incurs a direct result of campaign activity. So I agree with you. We want to talk about it more broadly as well. Delegate, who I thought someone had their hand up. Okay.
I did, Madam Chair. My
ahead.
question, Delegate Feldmark asked my question, and I just wanted to make sure that there's a plan in place for how we can properly acknowledge that door knocking and phone banking is probably the two major aspects of campaigning that might fall in line with this bill.
Great point. And I think that my question has been answered as well. I'm comfortable with, as long as it's detailed in our summary, campaign summary that we all look at to make sure we're within the bounds. I think that is great. Is there a motion on this bill?
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, sir.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to take up the sponsor's amendment that she offered at the hearing with regard to allowing for campaign funds to be used for caring for an adult child with a disability.
Yes. Thank you, Stan. There is an amendment on this bill regarding an individual. So not just someone who is your child and a direct dependent, but also someone who has a disability that you may be caring for and you need care services in order to campaign. I think that's a good amendment. Delegate Fair, did you have your hand up for this, or you were going to bring a motion?
I was ready to bring a motion. Do
Perhaps
we have
on the amendment?
Yes, I will gladly support the amendment. I do not have the amendment number in front of me to make a motion on the amendment, but I would move favorable on the amendment.
All right, on the sponsor amendment.
Second.
Awesome. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we are on the amendment. All those in favor of the sponsor's amendment to add those with the caring for childcare expenses, or care expenses, I should say, for those with a disability, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it, and we've amended the bill to add the sponsor's amendment. On the bill as amended, may I have a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any further discussion on the bill? All right, seeing none, on the bill as amended, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand. All right, and any opposed? I mean, it was a unanimous yes, but okay. All right, so unanimously out of subcommittee. Thank you so much, Delegate Guyton. We have passed as favorable with amendment, House Bill 331. All right, moving next to House Bill 436, which deals with voter registration and the age notification to minors. Since you're a part of the committee, Delegate Fair, will you help refresh the memories of the members on what the bill does?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. So this bill very simply changes the pre-registration age from 16 years to 15 years and 9 months. As we heard through testimony, individuals who are going for their learner's permit at 15 years and 9 months should be given the opportunity to simply check a box to pre-register, as they would be able to do when they go to get their provisional license at age 16 years. It does include one extra provision, which includes a notification piece, which simply reminds the young person which election cycle that they will be allowed to vote first in. In some of our jurisdictions, some young people are able to vote at 16, some young people are able to vote at 17, and then some are able to vote at 18. So we just want to make sure that as we are encouraging engagement, that we are transparent with young people as when they can start to vote and in what election they can start to vote. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And so that's the amendment, the sponsor amendment on the bill, that piece.
No, it's all in the bill.
That's in there. Okay. All right.
It's all there.
Okay, got it. All righty. Any discussion about this bill? All right. Well, since there isn't any discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Delegate Miller.
Thank you. I was trying to raise my hand. Just real quick, when we talked a little bit about doing the math, so this means if they are 15 and 9 months, they would not be able to vote in the next election. It would be the next election after that. Or is there any case where they would be voting in the next election?
Assuming I can't imagine. I don't think so, but I don't want to say that like definitively because I can't. I'm sure there's a mathematical equation that could come up that way.
Okay, it's
But
fine.
yeah.
It would be a long time out before they would be, and I would just want them to be clear on that they would not be voting in the next election, because usually it's that they would be in time to vote for the next. So I just wanted to be clear on that. You know,
and that's sometimes, and I think that's what the notification piece really cuts into too, is not only can sometimes they vote before they're 18, depending on what municipality they live in, but also like, for example, if the next election was the presidential election, they can't vote in that, but they could vote in the municipal election the following year or the gubernatorial election the following year after that. So this will help keep clarity and they understand this is the election cycle I can first vote in.
Yeah, and also they can vote in the if they're going to be 18 by the general election, they can vote in the primary as well. That's current law.
All right. Any other further discussion? All right. I'd like to entertain a motion on the bill.
Move favorable.
Second.
Wonderful. It's been moved and seconded. We are on House Bill 436. We already asked if there was further discussion, I believe. So in that case, moved and seconded. I am forgetting the way that this goes. Please raise your hand if you're in support. All those in opposition? All right. Well, it's been, wait, was that an opposition, Delegate Griffith? Okay, that's support. Okay, unanimous support. For a second, I forgot all of my parliamentarian skills for a moment there. But I think we did all the proper steps to pass out House Bill 436 unanimously out of Election Law Subcommittee. We do have one more bill that is just for discussion. Want to get some temperature checks and some thoughts on House Bill 257. This is the bill that deals with unaffiliated voters and allowing them to be able to register during I think that the bill only has it during early voting right now. They're just doing it during early voting. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My only concern with this bill is I want to make sure it's fair and cuts both ways. So if we're going to do this, it shouldn't just be independent to party affiliation. If people can change their registration, they should be able to change their registration you know, R to D, D to R, independent, vice versa, whatever the case may be. That's my only position on the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Griffith. I am not sure that we are ready to, I mean, would you consider that just almost like an open primary? I'm not sure that we are ready to move the state to an open primary, but I think that a step in that direction and just opening up and making sure we all have had the situations where we were at the polls campaigning and someone shows up, they're unaffiliated and they have a limited ballot. But I do appreciate that comment and that interest in just opening it up fully. Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So currently, an unaffiliated voter can change their registration to join a party in preparation for a primary. And I know there are some unaffiliated voters who do that fairly regularly and then switch back. Can you remind me, either Mr. Ward or Mr. Demarinis, what currently is the time frame in terms of how, like when the cutoff is, how far before early voting starts? How much additional time are we giving folks with this bill?
So it's 21 days before the election. It's the same as the deadline for registering to vote.
21 days before the election, like election day?
Yes, correct.
So help me with my math. How many days before the beginning of early voting is that?
Oh, let me think. Let's see. I guess it's,
Be
I think it'd be, yeah, I think it would be 9 days.
9 days. Okay.
Because 8 days of early voting ends 4 days before election day.
Okay. So this bill gives folks an additional 9 days to make that decision. Is that right?
Well, they could register anytime during early voting. So
Okay, so 9 through the
Plus
end of
8.
early voting. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So anytime under the bill, anytime up until early voting ends 4 days before election day.
Any other discussion or thoughts? All right, seeing none, let's definitely continue the conversation. I think this is a really impactful bill. So we want to be thoughtful around how we move forward. We know that unaffiliated voters are the fastest growing in our state. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's unaffiliated. So this is definitely an important issue to bring up and to figure out how we move forward. So I appreciate everyone's thoughts and feedback and input. So we'll continue the conversation on this one. So that completes our work. That was our last bill for the day. Thank you, committee members, for the helpful thoughts and feedback and discussion. We're able to pass 2 bills today. So I don't know if they'll be on the full committee voting list or not. I think it depends on if our wonderful staff is able to get them on there. This looks like it will be awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
So great. So there's enough time for us to vote these out in full committee later on. Well, thank you again for your time, and I'll see everyone in committee at 1. Bye-bye.